following program on Other Derana 24 is classified MA. It is intended for adults and may be unsuitable for children under 17. It may contain crude, indecent language, explicit sexual activity, graphic violence, or political ideology. Viewer discretion is strictly advised. State of the Nation is an opinion-based program. The thoughts and opinions shared within this program are not intended to offend or disregard anyone's perspectives or beliefs. We aim to foster open dialogue, encourage critical thinking, and explore thought-provoking subjects. Recognizing the importance of diversity and inclusion, this program welcomes all viewpoints and cherishes the right to express them freely. This program also contains the opinions of the participants and does not reflect the views and beliefs of the Derana Media Network. The network believes in a safe space for all ideas to be expressed and on its duty to create such a platform for free speech. Viewer discretion is strictly advised.
Good evening. Accountability and accounting for Sri Lanka's future. With the inaugural budget of the current NPP government passing all its hurdles, now it becomes the working blueprint for the current year that will build on all the promises made to the people. Will it be effective? More importantly, will this get us to the promised land of prosperity? And then there's the accountability part. Since this government is very keen on accountability, even going in bringing cases from way back in 1989, will they be more interested in finding out as to what organizations like the USAID did here in Sri Lanka? For insights, analysis and opinions, I'll speak to the Minister of Labour, Dr. Anil Jayantha Fernando, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Arun Hemachandra, Opposition Parliamentarian from the SJB, Sujeewa Senasinghe, Opposition Parliamentarian from the SLPP, Namal Rajapakse, former Minister of Water Management and Irrigation, Jayantha, former Human Rights Commissioner Dr. Mahieash, Global Business Cycle Economist Dr. Kenneth De Silva, Lecturer in charge of Public International Law at the Bandaranaike Centre for International Studies Dr. Udara Soisa, and Economic Researcher and Writer Sunil Abewardhana. Good evening, I'm Mahieash Johnney and this is the State of the Nation. A very good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of State of the Nation, where we provide you with reliable insights and compelling opinions. Well, in today's episode, we'll explore the future of our economy and take a closer look at USAID activities here in Sri Lanka. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the show. Well, the Bible says in Matthew 12:25, every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. I know most of you watching are not Christians, but there's a lesson we can learn from the teachings of Christ. Every day, Sri Lankans like you and me are pitted against each other in a very divided, very polarized society that cannot understand how to get back on track and carve a path towards success of our own. Radical politicians have continued to push us against each other, against our own Sri Lankan friends, our Sri Lankan brothers and sisters, and our Sri Lankan values. The radicalization of our society continues to be led by many of our blinded politicians, puppeteered by various entities internally and externally of our shores. Every single day we hear, especially from neoliberal mindsets via these mouthpiece of Colombo liberals, who claim to tell us that we ought to be ashamed of our Sri Lankan values or our own solutions for our own problems, and that we ought to be thinking like the world. We have to let go of this Godé ideology, because for most of them, who fake their way through society, leaving behind that Godé ideology helps them to break us apart and make sure that we lose our own self-identity. That way, it's easy to bring in whatever their agenda and implement it however they want. But the reality is, as Sri Lankans, there's so much more that unites us than things that divides us. We all want a better future in this country, not in another country, but we all want a period where we can say we are one of the richest nations in the world. We all want the future for our children to be bright, a future where all of them can enjoy the fruits of this land and be joyous that we did the right thing by them. Sri Lanka has limitless potential. The only limitation that exists is in our thinking. We think as a member of a lesser nation, whereas we ought to be thinking that there's greatness in our nation that can make us better than any other. There is no point talking about a rich history of 2,000 years when our present is an abysmal state. It's vital that we all work towards making the present state rich so that the future can thrive too. Well, during this election season, look for the message of unity, not division. Look for the politicians who speak about the strengths of Sri Lanka rather than our weaknesses. Look for the leaders who can inspire generations, not divide us further so their nefarious agendas can come to play. It's really time to take back Sri Lanka's narrative, and as we the people must drive it to the point where our story becomes great. As cheesy as it sounds, it's time to make Sri Lanka great again. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. In our lead story tonight, Budget 2025. Well, the government's inaugural budget is now just not a talking document with the passing of the same at the House floor. With a supermajority, as expected, it has transformed itself into a working document. The set path is very clear. The government is not deviating from the Wickremesinghe era policies. They are continuing with them. Despite many in the government talking contrary to that effect, the proof is in the pudding, and this pudding, called Budget 2025, has the same aftertaste like the last year's one. Setting in stone is basically the IMF path of working, and just like that, they have kept in line with all the set methodologies by this international body. This also beats the question, is Sri Lanka or us? Are we really in charge of our economy and the set path towards recovery? And more importantly, whose recovery are we talking about here? Is it our very own, or is it the recovery of our creditors? Let's get reactions to this story, and for that, first of course, let's get the opposition's point of view. And join me now from our country's opposition, the SJB, is Parliamentarian Sujeewa Senasinghe. Thank you very much, Parliamentarian, for your time. Appreciate it. Let's break down the budget presented by this government. Are you satisfied as a party?
I wouldn't say I'll be satisfied. No, Johnny. I think the laymen will find it hard, because they were expecting a lot. There were so many promises by the government. The electricity prices, the petroleum prices, the diesel and petrol, kerosene oil, and there were so many promises on taking loans without interest, without collateral. So nothing had been delivered by the government except for the slight wage hike. So that wage hike also doesn't compare with the inflation. The inflation has skyrocketed over the past few years. Now it's a bit low because we have already come to a standstill in inflation has gone up so much. So with that inflation, I don't think the price hike is reasonable. So for those reasons, and the private sector, they said 40% increase of the private sector salaries, and that has not happened. So without production, without manufacturing, without a proper plan, the next year will be even more difficult.
Parliamentarian, now that this budget has passed the final hurdle and basically with its initial proposals intact, what do you think the trajectory of this nation would be as it continues to be implemented?
So this is a problem because this government, I don't know what they believe in. It's a bit of a Marxist sort of ideology they started with now, but now they are pro-Western, open economy and liberal. And inside the party also they have issues. Lal Kanta says one thing, Andhra Kumara says another thing, and the Malimawa MPs say one thing, the JEP hardliner Stilwin says something else. Adani has left, and the dockyard, the Japanese are leaving, and then the Australian petroleum, they have left. So none of the investors which were planning to come, because they have a stable government and we expected a stable government can encourage a lot of investment to come into the country, but that has not happened. So without the investment, without manufacturing, there's no plan for manufacturing. Only 0.4% have been allocated for manufacturing. When it was last year, it was 0.7%. So 0.3% has come down. And with this issue, we have to pay about $12.5 billion. It's about $5 billion they have to pay on debt repayment, sovereign bonds and swap facilities. And then the budget deficit is about $7.5 billion. So altogether, $12.5 billion, they have to find this money from somewhere. So I don't see where they can find this money. And their target was to improve the exports from $12.5 billion to $19 billion. And I don't see the plan, I don't see the platform, I don't see a way forward in getting that target achieved. So they will have a lot of issues because this budget they are presenting on the little good work which had been done by Mr. Wickramasinghe's previous government, and they are reaping the little benefits that which had come from that those policies. So there are policies which they have taken within these 5 months. We'll see the fruits in about another 10 to 15 months. That's going to be difficult because they have not kind of concentrated on developing the production in the country. So I think they've actually given the business people, Johnny, they have given the normal business people to kind of grow the economy. The private sector has to grow and they will do a little bit of work. But the government involvement in that is, I think it's very, very minimal.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it at that. That was opposition parliamentarian from the SJB, Sujeewa Senasinghe. Appreciate it, sir. Well, more reactions on the budget, and for that, joining me now is the former Minister of Water Supply and Estate Infrastructure and current member of the opposition from the United National Party, Jayantha. Appreciate it. Parliamentarian, for taking the time. Now, Parliamentarian, there's an election on the horizon and the government now has passed the budget for the coming year. In your opinion, is this a people-friendly budget?
Well, first of all, Mahieash, thank you for having me on Derana. And to answer your question, to be very honest, this budget does have its positives and negatives. But however, having been in a cabinet which, kick-started economic recovery last year, I can tell you that this budget to me, it seems more or less very similar to former President Wickramasinghe's budget. But at the same time, I think some of the so-called reforms, you can't really call them the reforms that people voted them in for. Considering the fact that our poverty is at 25.9% and most of our welfare programs, we are taking basically external credit to fund those programs. So that is not sustainable in my view. And I think especially with the CEB, the various reforms brought in by former Minister Kanchana Vijayasekara, and they are quite commendable, though they were very reformist. They are quite commendable, but I do believe, I think the issue is, for the current government, to try and show that they are a populist state, but at the same time liberalizing markets. 65 years of socialism led to more or less 1 year of capitalism. So in my view, I would say on the offset, it does seem like a people-friendly budget, but it is, I think the implications are going to be far more strenuous. So it's more or less a budget designed for the election.
Parliamentarian, now in your opinion, the budget is basically passed and now it becomes a working document. Now, as we go on with this particular proposals that has been set forward by the government, do you think that the country, let's say by the end of next year or by the time that we have the next budget coming in, that we will be safeguarded and also out of the woods with regard to our economic recovery?
In my personal view, I do think to say that we will be safeguarded, we'll have to take it with a pinch of salt, considering the fact that we are significantly higher compared to what the IMF's recommendation of the deficit, not exceeding 5.2%. I believe we are at 6.7%. So that is going to be paid for by the taxpayers, and I believe even expert financial institutions have made their stand clear. It is a very ambitious budget and it's highly optimistic. But there is a very high chance it will lead to, financial stress and difficulties in fiscal consolidation. And I think we should also take into account, I think the dark horse here is, we are not taking into account the current change in administration in the United States of America. Because if you look at it in a geopolitical context, with the trade war in the offing, I think we should be preparing ourselves for a difficult period. However, given, I am giving benefit of doubt to the President, His Excellency, Anil he has shown that he can be pragmatic. And hopefully we'll be able to safeguard ourselves when time comes. But given the current context, I would say it's quite ambitious, the budget, and it's going to be difficult to safeguard.
Absolutely. Well, let's wait and see. Thank you very much. That was the former Minister of Water Supply and Estate Infrastructure and also the current member of the opposition from the United National Party, Jayantha, speaking to us. Appreciate it, sir. Now, contesting the opposition's point of view, the government is pointing the finger towards recent data released. Now, as per the data released by the central bank, Sri Lanka's economy grew in the last quarter of 2024 by 5.4%, along with the per capita income growing to around $4,516 from the previous year. However, one of the key areas of focus in this country, which is the agriculture industry, now according to data by the central bank, the industry's growth shrank 2.2% due to issues pertaining to crops at the latter part of last year. Now, despite the positives, economic experts are warning for the government for them to be very cautious with its money management as we move on towards opening the economy to pre-2022 and pre-COVID eras. One of the jitters many are having is the government's decision to open the ban on vehicle imports, despite the government reassuring concerns are on the rise to how tight the government can keep the lid and ensure that foreign reserves won't take a hit. Well, let's bring in Deputy Minister of Economic Development, who's also the Minister of Labour, Dr. Fernando. Thank you very much, Minister, for your time. I appreciate it. I know I spoke to you about this issue a couple of weeks back on Get Real, but since we are now getting closer to the lifting of the vehicle ban, I'm once again asking, Doctor, whether the government is confident that when this ban is lifted, it would not dent the foreign reserves, because during the budget debate, an opposition parliamentarian said with much confidence that the dollar reserves will surely drop to around $4 billion from current rates with this importation of vehicles. He warned the government to take steps. How do you respond, Minister? Is there a threat?
Mahieash, it's like this. You have to first understand what's really meant by these reserves and its implications. So here, gross external reserves, meaning the amount of the foreign assets held by the central bank and the monetary authority, so that is mainly the central bank as of now. This reserve as it means by the word the reserve, it's something set aside to face and utilize for importation purposes. It is an international like indicator to measure the level of our external buffer. So there is no hard and fast rule that it should always increase or decrease, but benchmark is whether we have at least adequate reserves for importation for 3 months time period. Just coming to your question, of course, when we increase imports, when we make payments in dollars, maybe loan repayments, debt servicing or investments, of course the reserve level goes down. Then again that would really would build when the central bank purchases, exports increases. Likewise, it is something that not static number, it is dynamic value, it increases. So it is pretty obvious. When we import, the value goes down. It doesn't mean that it is a big issue. When we take the entire macroeconomic situation, it is one variable, the external reserve is one variable. We are confident and we are highly confident that we are building it. So therefore, by showing that it went down, it would create a big economic issue, it is not true. We need to look at from a holistic the point of view. And the importation, of course, the monetary authorities would very closely monitor the situation, how it fluctuates. As of now, the present the lifting of the vehicle importation, the ban was done after doing all these calculations. And again, I must emphasize the fact that economics cannot be simply weaved and interpreted with numbers only. It is a social science.
Minister, now with regard to the economic projections, how confident are you with the data at hand that the set targets of the IMF can be reached for this fiscal year?
Yeah, with respect to the fiscal administration, our targets are the revenue, government revenue collections. Revenue comes from several sources as of now. So basically we work based on the best available information. And as of now we are highly confident. Why I am saying this? During the short period of our government, 3 months or so, we were able to meet the targets. That is without before the budget, with the given setup, given structure, given tax administration, even with these constraints we were able to do. So for the next year, of course, some constraints, structural issues are there. However, with the experience, with our commitment, and even we see very important thing with the other revenue collecting authorities. So they are dedicated, they work hard, and they have a kind of enthusiasm built in them that they could do it. So we are hopeful that we can not only reach the target, but also we may exceed. For instance, last 2 months, January, February, already we have exceeded the targets.
Indeed, Minister, before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about investments. Now, Adani Group is now saying that they are willing to work with Sri Lanka, but on the same terms. Government says it needs revisions to the existing agreement. Adani later refuted news that they were willing to renegotiate. Now, what's the middle path here, Minister? Because we do need investments to flow into the country, and not sure that there are bottlenecks when investing in Sri Lanka.
No, actually, we need to first understand what the real bottlenecks in investing in Sri Lanka and any other negotiations or the things like, because this was an agreement they made with the previous government. No matter, we can continue as long as those agreements or investments would really serve the purpose. So here, fundamental issue with regard to Adani in the energy sector, the power purchasing agreement. That price is too high because we are working with an objective of bringing the electricity cost down at least by 30%. In order to do that, the power, the purchases or the unit at least should be within 5 cents, but this agreement is 8.26 cents dollars in terms of dollars. So that is too expensive. That is for 20 years. The projection for solar and especially the wind in the future, what we call renewable energy, is gradually coming down, maybe 3 cents, 2 cents, and the capacity is also increasing. In such a situation, if we go for with the same terms, we would be really trapped. So therefore, we did not, we do not, how to say, discriminate investors. We have created level the playing field here, and the facilitating them and the very transparent, so that if they can bring the cost down. In the case of Adani, of course, Adani supplies the same energy to Indian grid at a price of 3.5 cents, but here it is 8.26. So it's apparently it looks to be unfair. So it doesn't mean that we are finding a middle path or just fix something. No, our objective is totally different. As long as the new investment can reach and address these objectives, of course, we don't have any hesitations with working with any investor. So always this is open for Adani. We have not chased Adani way. It is wrong, the reporting. We just told and stress, even like further re-stress, that we want to reconsider this situation. If the price can be brought down, so situation is okay. And this is open for any investor in the future. We strongly believe that once this message really would pass to investors, that there is a level playing field. They need not to pay any commission, bribes, and we further reduce the time taken to approve investment, because as of now they have to work with different windows. It takes longer time. Now through a single window, we would certainly bring the time taken to clear the basic things, licensing and others. Maybe in the future things would be all right, and investors can find good opportunities in Sri Lankan context.
Absolutely. All right, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. That was the Deputy Minister of Economic Development and Labour, Minister Dr. Anil Jayantha. Fernando. Appreciate it, sir. Let's take a short commercial break, and when we return, Dr. Kenneth De Silva, a global business cycle economist and later the former CEO of Ceylon Development Engineering Company, and economic researcher Sunil Abewardhana will be here to talk about why this government too is missing the mark with the IMF plan. This is the State of the Nation. Back in a moment. Welcome back everyone to the State of the Nation, now with the budget 2025 clearing the final hurdle and now transforming itself as a working blueprint of Sri Lanka's economy. Let's get more reactions to that story. For that, let's go to Global Business Cycle economist Dr. Kenneth De Silva. Thank you very much, Doctor. Good to see you always. Now, first of all, just give us your take on this budget, and is it in the right direction?
I mean, the budget seems to have two significant components, which I think I've spoken about before also. One is that the government is trying to fit a framework within the IMF overall governing doctrine, which is going to be extremely challenging, as I mentioned a couple of times on your program, Mahieash. So looking at the budget from a very objective point of view, some of it is really encouraging, while there are significant challenges and headwinds in terms of how we're going to get about implementing this budget. Those are some of the concerns. In fact, for example, if you look at the revenue numbers, they are looking at increase in revenue from about 13.5 to 15.2, which is going to be extremely challenging and painful for an economy that is already tottering. So in whichever shape or form you look at it, those revenue numbers are technically unrealistic to be achieved in this kind of economic downturn, and it'll only entail more pain to the business community and to the individuals who are already living on from paycheck to paycheck and are living on a very frugal means. So the revenue numbers are, really concerning. Having said that, the budget deficit also is projected to reach 6.7, almost 7%. These are projected numbers. Eventuality would be far greater, I would expect. So with that kind of backdrop, I want to remain relatively optimistic, but I feel there are significant challenges, as I said. So that's a cautious side of it. The positive side of it is the government is really trying to bring about a manufacturing and a production economy, and to do that, they are also pushing a reform structure in terms of the banking and finance sector by looking at a longer-term credit availability. Now, to do that, they are proposing a development bank, but the details of those development banks and etc. have not been fleshed out to be in a very clear sense. So we are hopeful that that will transpire as we go forward into the new fiscal year. That would be a key component in terms of how we resolve the economic crisis and reverse some of these issues that we have faced.
Indeed, Doctor, now with regard to taxation, one of the things that the former Minister of Finance said was that there would be another mini budget in the future. However, this was refuted by the current Deputy Minister of Finance and also the Deputy Minister of Economic Development, saying that there would not be another round of taxes. But do you think more taxes to come?
Definitely, by the looks of it, those numbers are very clearly mentioned in the budget. As I said, we are kind of ring fenced within the IMF framework, and I think the president already had a discussion with the IMF, and it was live streamed as well. And the IMF managing director had complimented the government for staying the course. So it only kind of reinforces the current thought process that the government will not deviate too much from the current trajectory and the parameters set in the IMF agreement, and there is no escape. So the revenue targets which are placed have to be met by further fiscal tightening, which is actually looking at increase in the indirect and direct taxes. So those are going to be extremely painful for Sri Lankan businesses as well as the already suffering SMEs and the MMEs, and also to professionals who are penalized at every given corner. So, again, consumption is going to be affected, and through the contraction in consumption, if you are going to achieve IMF targets, then that's a choice that Sri Lanka will have to decide in terms of how long they're going to stomach it.
Indeed, Doctor, now this government continues to go in the IMF set path, and when you look at events that's unfolding in the United States with regard to the current administration, they seems to be saying that all these organizations are rogue organizations who are working in void of their set mandate, and then there was some conversations that even that said Donald Trump, the current US president, might even pull out of the IMF. So in a situation like that, and with more taxes towards Sri Lanka might be in the cards by the United States, what do you think our path forward should be, especially in terms of exports?
Yeah, the global discussion on multilateral institutions and institutions like the USAID have been discussed in many forums internationally, and the validity of these organizations and the implications for the global South has been written about by stalwarts like Joseph Stiglitz and Jeffrey Sachs in multiple journals. However, these have not really resonated within Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka has not paid too much of attention to what these organizations are capable in terms of derailing the growth trajectory. Sri Lanka has had 17 IMF programs, and it shows that going to the same so-called physician 17 times with hardly any results. We seem to be quite happy to go down that path. Now, in terms of the overall taxation, that's one of the biggest mandates that the IMF kind of pushes. They want to have smaller governments, and therefore you kind of shrink government and government's operations and their mandate within the public domain. So that's one aspect. And secondly, they repeal all incentives given to industries and SMEs and MMEs. So it'll be really challenging for Sri Lanka to reach some of its so-called capital formation targets, FDI targets, with these types of incentives being repealed. There is talk that the Strategic Development Act, which was enacted for the port city investments, will be repealed. It has been put forward as part of the IMF agenda and program, which in fact the previous government and this government have both signed off on. So these types of activity-based deliverables have to be met by the government because they have signed off on it for the particular tranches to be released. So it shows that we are moving into very dangerous and really scary territory, and there is no escaping more taxes, as we are seeing it's been highlighted in the budget as well, Mahieash.
Indeed. So let's wait and see. Always good to speak to you, Dr. Global Business Cycle Economist, Dr. Kenneth De Silva. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Mahieash. Thank you.
Now, recently, an interesting article caught my eye, published on the website Asia Progress Forum, titled, "Will the NPP continue Sri Lanka's path of economic suicide?" Now, in the article, its author argues as to how, despite the NPP government getting a super mandate to reset Sri Lanka's economic errors and put it in the right direction, the option of following the dotted line set forth by the IMF will continue to hinder growth, especially when looking at the current budget. The author writes, and I quote, "A major shortfall in the budget is a lack of a developmental thrust, which is essential for the country to grow out of the current crises." Rather than discussing the minutiae of the budget, it is worth looking at how Sri Lanka got into this situation by making same mistakes over and over again. That's a direct quote from the article. Well, to discuss more on this, joining me now is the author of that article, former CEO of Ceylon Development Engineering Company and also economic researcher Sunil Abeyewardene. Thank you very much, Mr. Abeyewardene, for your time. Very interesting article indeed, and I very much sincerely urge everyone to read it, which is available on asiaprogressiveforum.lk. Now, Mr. Abeyewardene, do you honestly think that IMF set path would hinder Sri Lanka's real goal of being economically independent? Because the argument from the neoliberal think tanks is that, well, we need the IMF to get access to the money markets and, more importantly, to get the seal of approval of the world as a safe economy to invest. But on the other side, since 2022, we have been in the IMF program and we have in fact got the seal of approval of the IMF. But investors are in fact, even the ones who are interested in investing here in Sri Lanka, are pulling out.
Yes, Mahieash. First thing is, we have to realize, why did we have to go to the IMF? We went to the IMF because we had a balance of payments problem, a critical balance of payments problem. If you look at the IMF program, it addresses all the other issues except the balance of payments issue. Now, what is going to happen is, even if you sort out all your other fiscal matters, at the end of the day, you will still not have enough foreign exchange to meet your debt obligations. So therefore, should not have the IMF program concentrated on sorting out the balance of payments problem. It has not done that. And therefore, definitely, the whole program is structured in such a way that you will, after 2020, end of 2027, you will have to go back to the foreign money markets to obtain funds. And that is the whole purpose of this, that's the agenda of the IMF program. So, if the government doesn't realize that, then we are in deep trouble, because already the program has been going on for 3 years and we have not pinpointed the issue really. So, if the government doesn't realize that, I mean, suddenly you will find yourself in a situation that you have to go back to the and start borrowing again, and then where does that leave us? Huh?
Interesting point of view indeed. Well, Mr. Abhivardhana, if we are to correct this wrong, in your opinion, what must this government do differently, and how should their thinking be, especially in this new era of global economics?
You see, if we had understood the problem when we first went to the IMF, we have already lost 3 valuable years. If we had come up with another program while the IMF program was going on to develop our exports and be able to increase our foreign exchange earning capacity, we would have been in a different situation. But unfortunately, that was not done. We have lost 3 years and we have another 3 years. So, there is hardly anything that the government can do within that time frame. But, however, they have to think of being able to stand up on our feet someday. We can't keep on going on like this. You see, what you have to realize is that the global economy has created far in excess money during the last 45 years, and that money has to find sources to lend to also. So, therefore, this whole program, the IMF is also engaged in, I would say it's a kind of a political agenda as well, where countries, this money, this global money has to be lent to countries, because if without industrialization you cannot stand on your own feet. That has to be understood. So, the future is not very bleak unless the government can come up quickly with some sort of programs which will increase our export capacities. And one area that can easily be done is the gem and jewelry industry. If you develop Colombo as the gem center and the jewelry center of Asia, I mean, there is tremendous potential there. And beyond that, the World Bank report itself says that the present exporters, if they are given a little bit of help, that they can increase their exports by a considerable amount. I mean, they have mentioned the figure of that, saying that they can increase exports by as much as 10 billion. That is what the World Bank says in their report.
Interesting point indeed. Well, let's leave it at that. That was former CEO and economic researcher Sunil Abhivardhana. Thank you very much. Let's take a short break, and when we return, what did USAID really do in Sri Lanka? USAID coming under fire from all over the world, especially accused to be a front face for nefarious operations. What was its role in Sri Lanka, and should the government be focusing on finding it out? This is the State of the Nation. Back in a moment.
All you have to do is get a list of all of the things you can see by the heading. It's fake, it's fraudulent, it's probably kickbacks, where they send the money and then it gets kicked back to the person that sent it. So the ones that are good, and there's not many of them, but the ones that are good, and there are some, will probably have that be handled by Marco Rubio in the State Department.
Welcome back, everyone, to the State of the Nation. That was U.S. President Donald Trump in various instances talking about how the USAID has violated its mandate and has been a front organization for nefarious agendas the world over under the watchful eye of the administration it served prior. Now, the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, was founded in 1961 as a vital component of American foreign policy designed to offer financial support to countries in need. Established during the Cold War under President John F. Kennedy, the agency's aim was to strengthen societies through assistance in health, education, and economic growth, while also working to diminish Soviet influence, that is way back in the 60s. However, throughout the years, USAID has faced various controversies, with critics claiming it has been utilized for political manipulation instead of solely humanitarian efforts. Now, the Trump administration's move to limit USAID's activities in recent months had sparked renewed discussions about the agency's function, with some asserting that it was essential to rein in its excesses. One of the most significant allegations against USAID is its purported role in political interference, particularly concerning regime change and civil unrest in various countries. And according to allegations made, these nations include Sri Lanka, India, Nepal, and Pakistan as well in this part of our region. Although the agency's position itself as a humanitarian organization, numerous reports indicate that its financial assistance often served to promote American geopolitical interests rather than solely aiding those in need. Now, critics contend that USAID's operations extend beyond development efforts, functioning instead as tools for influencing foreign governments and domestic policies, and more importantly, working as a covert agency for the CIA. Now, a prominent instance of this interference is USAID's alleged involvement in the 2014 revolution in Ukraine. Individuals like Victoria Nuland, who was under the guise of helping a nation in crisis, was caught red-handed pulling strings to bring in a president that was subservient towards her and American powers at that time. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's the current head of the Department of Health and Human Services of the United States, asserted that USAID provided funding for the uprising that resulted in the removal of Ukraine's democratically elected president. Watch.
To go through the modern history, 2014, there are riots it's called the Maidan Rebellion in Ukraine, which we're not told that we are financing those riots. The newspapers never told us, our government never told us. USAID, which is a CIA front, put $5 billion into funding those riots. Those riots lead to a coup d'etat against the first democratically elected government of the Ukraine. It was a government that refused to choose sides and to say we're going to be on the side of the West. So we wanted them out. A month before that government is overthrown, Victoria Nuland, who's the part of the centerpiece of the neocon ideology and who is now a high-level official in the State Department, has a secret call with the U.S. ambassador, which is tape recorded and is now public, which anybody can go and look up, where she is picking the new cabinet for Ukraine, which is which is a U.S. Western cabinet. So they're picking the new government a month before the old government is overthrown.
Is that how democracy when Tory Newland picks your government?
Well, that's the point.
Well, a similar situation was reported in Bangladesh where just last year, investigations by the Sunday Guardian revealed that USAID supported organizations who were conspiring against Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government. We all know Bangladesh, a beacon of growth in South Asia, suddenly befell to rise, which is not directly pinned on organizations like USAID. And more importantly, worked in tandem towards the collapse of that nation. Now, in Sri Lanka, these same types of violent riots back in 2022 failed to create an interim government as pushed by the current US ambassador. But in Bangladesh, they somehow managed to do just that. The report indicated that since 2019, USAID had been working with various factions to undermine Hasina's administration in Bangladesh. Now, after her ousting, the agency quickly redirected financial aid to the newly formed interim government, raising concerns that USAID was actively attempting to destabilize a sovereign nation instead of helping its citizens. And of course, we all know what happened in neighboring India, where even President Donald Trump questioned as to why USAID was sending in around $20 million for election-related matters in India. Watch.
$21 million for voter turnout in India. What do we need to spend $21 million for voter turnout in India? Wow, $21 million. I guess they were trying to get somebody else elected. Wow, we ought to tell the Indian government, because when we hear that Russia spent about $2 in our country, it was a big deal, right? They took some internet ads for $2,000. This is a total breakthrough. $21 million for India elections, $29 million to strengthen the political landscape in Bangladesh.
I think as a government, we are looking into it because, such organizations have an obligation to report. And my sense is, the facts will come out. Now, I read saying, so-and-so dealt with USAID or so-and-so. Look, it's not a question of did you deal with USAID or not. USAID was allowed, has been here historically. But USAID was allowed here in good faith, to do good faith activities. Now, suggestions are being made out of America that there are activities which are in bad faith. So, it surely warrants a look. And if there is something to it, I think the country should know who are the people involved in the bad faith activity.
Well, that was US President Donald Trump earlier, and following him was External Affairs Minister of India S. Jayantha talking about how USAID was allowed to operate in India in good faith, to do good things, and not to be part of nefarious agendas. And he clearly said that it's worrying to hear this news coming out from the United States about these underhand work done on the guise of humanitarian activities. Now, as of now, many politicians in India have asked the United States to respond and to provide accurate data about what kind of interference USAID has done in the subcontinent, and some has even gone to the extent of seeking criminal procedures against this organization. So it makes sense for us Sri Lankans to ask the obvious question. Did USAID go beyond its mandate here in Sri Lanka? Were they in any way responsible for any kind of nefarious activities here in Sri Lanka, especially in the 2022 crisis? I mean, these are questions before raised by us, our own politicians need to raise, and more so ensure that our nation's sovereignty remains intact. Sri Lanka's relationship with NGOs continues to be a bittersweet one, many accusing them of this exact nature that's been uncovered by DOGE in America. I mean, honestly, this is also a very good lesson from America, where they by themselves are cleaning their own cobwebs before policing the world. So, what kind of money did USAID use in Sri Lanka and for what purposes? For that, let's go to our data board, where tonight Anil Vikramasinghe is standing by with the details. Anil, I know you have been diving really deep into finding as to what kind of activities USAID has been engaging in, particularly in terms of recent times. What did you manage to uncover?
Yes, Mahieash, thanks for having me. The problem is that while we did a lot of digging, the answers still remain a little unclear. Of course, Sri Lanka is no stranger to USAID. One of its administrators, Samantha Powers, has frequently been in and out of the country, coming as recently as last year when the newest president was elected as well. So safe to say we're some sort of favorite, not exactly sure of the reason why. Here are some of the projects that we found through our research that have been currently ongoing and also have previously been completed. As you can see, it fits the humanitarian NGO agenda. There's economic development, reconciliation, and also climate change adaptation, among many, to say the least. So the problem is not, the problem that we faced was not the fact that there's any sort of legality issues when it comes to how the funds are reaching the country. Clearly, the administrators of the time gave the okay and the stamp of approval to understand that these funds are going to come to Sri Lanka. The problem is how those funds, once arriving in Sri Lanka, is going to be utilized. Is it going to be utilized as the humanitarian aid that it claims to be, or is there some sort of nefarious agenda at play? So we did a bit of digging, and of course, and you might recall Elon Musk, who heads Trump's administration when it comes to the Department of Government Efficiency, said that $7.9 million was used to teach journalists in Sri Lanka about pronoun etiquette and binary gendered language. Now, USAID has a slogan that says, "From the American people." Are the American taxpayers aware and approving of the fact that $7.9 million of their taxpayer money is being used in Sri Lanka to teach journalists how to say he, him, and she, her? I think not. So we did a lot more digging, and of course through Doja's website we found that there was actually a current active contract for 2025 that was worth $22 million that has now been suspended. And we saw that, of course, the country of operation, the principal performance country, is Sri Lanka. And who has this been awarded to? This has been awarded to a consulting firm called Deloitte LLP. So we were like, what exactly is Deloitte LLP doing in order to receive $22 million in order to operate in Sri Lanka? And unfortunately, through a lot of digging, we weren't able to find directly why, but as you can see on their website, Deloitte is essentially an audit assurance consulting tax service that actually basically does consultings. And also they say that they exist to make an impact that matters. Not exactly sure what they mean by that. And the problem is we couldn't clearly see what those funds were being earmarked for and what it was being used for. So we reached out and we tried to communicate with Deloitte. Specifically, I was in correspondence with the country managing partner for Deloitte Sri Lanka and also Maldives when it comes to what these funds were for. Unfortunately, through my personal email correspondence, I was only able to quote the fact that he is not in a position to comment any project scope, contractual arrangements, or financial allocations involving USAID and activities in Sri Lanka because Deloitte Sri Lanka was not in direct contract with USAID. So questions remain exactly what they plan to do because they were not giving us a proper answer as well. So the transparency issue is all up to the government to actually explain to the people why is Deloitte receiving such a big sum and what was it used for. Questions remain, Mahieash. Over to you.
Very interesting data indeed, Anuradi. I hope our politicians are watching and actually learn something out of that. Let's leave it at that. Anuradi Vikramasinghe tonight at the data board. Thank you very much. Let's get some more insights, and for that, joining me now is Parliamentarian Namal Rajapakse from the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. Thank you very much, Namal, for taking the time to join me on this episode. Now, I believe you are one of, if not the only parliamentarian to call for an inquiry into the dealings of USAID in Sri Lanka. Namal, what prompted this?
Well, thank you, Mahieash. I mean, as a party, we have been talking about external interferences in Sri Lankan administration and changing governments in Sri Lanka. Even in 2015, there was a lot of hype around the world and also in Sri Lanka that there had been some sort of external funding coming into certain political campaigns and also funding different politicians and organizations. So now the US government themselves have revealed certain information, and I think people of Sri Lanka and also the taxpayers in US has a right to have a better understanding how this funding has been spent and what are the outcomes. So I think as a member of parliament in Sri Lanka, I have a responsibility to make sure that our parliament act accordingly and gather information gather information and also see what steps that Sri Lankan government can take in the future to prevent these kind of incidents in the future and also take necessary action.
Namal, are you asking for this inquiry knowing something with regard to USAID activities here in Sri Lanka? Do you think the activities would have led towards an interference in our internal affairs?
Well, when you look at the organizations that USAID has worked in the past, it is clearly those organizations and individuals are very influential in our administration structure, I would say, and especially developing national policies and also implementing that. So, if at all, if USAID or any organization had ulterior motive, that can be influenced the administration of Sri Lanka through these individuals and organizations. So, that is not right, and I believe now the US government has revealed certain information, so we need to appoint a select committee. I don't know why Honorable Speaker is delaying it, which I questioned him in last business committee as well, which I've already put it out on my X, and I will question again in Parliament to see what steps the Sri Lankan Parliament has taken.
Interesting indeed. Well, now what is the response from the government on this matter? Are they willing to take up the issue in Parliament?
Well, when I questioned this in Parliament, the Honourable Justice Minister's stance was that they will be silent on it. And I categorically questioned him that are they going to be silent or are they going to have an inquiry or give a statement? And he clearly mentioned in Parliament that that they will be silent on this. So I believe the fact that the Speaker is delaying the Parliamentary Select Committee and also government or the Foreign Ministry not taking necessary steps or action or even issuing a statement, which is a clear indication that government just wanted to die down or to keep silent about this.
All right, let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. That was Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Parliamentarian Namal Rajapakse. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mahieash.
Well, we are going to take a short commercial break. When we return, former Human Rights Commissioner Dr. Pratibha Mahanamehewa and Attorney at Law Udara Soisa will be here to talk more about USAID and the need to regulate the NGO space. This is the State of the Nation. Back in a minute. Welcome back everyone to the State of the Nation. More on USAID and its alleged nefarious activities, especially here in Sri Lanka. Now, the Trump administration sought to limit USAID's influence due to concerns about its leadership and activities. President Donald Trump and Elon Musk both expressed strong criticism of USAID, with Trump referring to its leadership as radical lunatics and Musk calling it a criminal organization that should be dismantled. The restrictions imposed by the Trump administration aim to prevent USAID from interfering in sovereign affairs and engaging in activities that could be perceived to be as meddling in internal affairs. Now, as a result of the crackdown, organizations dependent on USAID funding, such as NGOs and journalistic outlets, faced financial uncertainty due to cuts in funding, which in certain instances a very good thing, as organizations that were not doing the humanitarian work and engaging as a phase organization for underhand agendas were closed down. But in some instances, even organizations that were doing good work helping communities too were affected by this. Now, the move to curb USAID's influence signals a shift in US foreign policy towards a more self-governing approach, moving away from interventionalist strategies that was the earlier mode of operation. Now, this is why Americans voted, right? They voted for a president who cares about them first and put the rest of the other nations secondary, or asking them to take care of themselves. Let's get some more insights. Joining me now is former Human Rights Commissioner Dr. Pratibha Mahanamaheva. Thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate your time. First of all, a lot of money spent by USAID all over the world and here in Sri Lanka as well. Now, we are learning that this funding is more towards changing minds rather than developing the quality of life of Sri Lankans. What are your views on this?
Well, Mahieash, we have seen the new president, Honorable Donald Trump, had taken a wise decision and a directive. That is where USAID funded several projects all over in the world had stopped. And it will really affect non-government organizations, those who are receiving the funds. And also USAID has pumped several billion of dollars for other countries as well as Sri Lanka. So what was the purpose? Was that real percentage was used for the purpose or for changing? According to my opinion, maybe 90% of the funds of these USAID may have used for their purposes to develop a country as well as their legal system as other development agendas. But we have seen 10% or 20% most probably had gone to different mindsets change and also overthrowing government which are against USA and to set up a system. So these 20% or 10%, I cannot say. So you must see a proper investigation and audit and a forensic investigation. You can realize how much they have spent for those things. So the first of all, we have to see how much we received, for what purpose they have used that, to overthrow a government, to change the mindset, to support the opposition, to support the government, to support the rebel groups, the different ways we can see. So USA from their country, even removing their board is not enough. They must start an investigation and ask from the officers. The Trump government must appoint a commission, special commission comprising Senate and Congress members, and see how they have utilized this money and what are the advantages for US. That's why we have to see. Most probably the world police person is USA, but the Trump government has changed many things, and we can see UNHRC this time. First of all, we have seen US supporting for Russia and other countries. So likewise, the world dimension are different. For those things, no need money. So while those earlier governments has spent money, must see a proper investigation and find out. Sri Lanka cannot do investigation because Sri Lanka, several institutions, they have received that money. But from US side, US embassy, they must take this positive view and observe on this matter.
Doctor, now one of the biggest questions that's now been revealed, especially with the Trump administration uncovering USAID, has been a phased operation of CIA in order to run covert operations that led towards change of governments the world over that were democratically elected. You think Sri Lanka is a victim of that as well?
Yes, there are allegations. How those fronts were funded, how those fronts and specifically this type of organization came forward and went against the legal established government. Mahieash, I can tell one thing, to do a struggle like this, someone has fund. And we have seen trains and other things for the transportation, food and all they may have. But we don't have proper evidence for that. Certain money, those who had taken, vanished before the changing of the government. So many allegations are coming up. So we must see how these USAID funds were deposited in several accounts, for what purpose they have done. Even after doing that, what is the purpose? Can they punish? Now let's see, maybe those funds may be unnecessary spent or overthrow government, not only in Sri Lanka, maybe Pakistan, Bangladesh, several countries this may have. But finally, what is the result? Who is going to punish? You can't do anything at the moment. This is all something lesson learned. This is a lesson learned for the future and see to utilize these funds in a proper purpose. Even in many funds given by other organizations, 20% they go for various other unnecessary things. But in future, you have to be very careful with funding for these organizations.
Doctor, going forward, do you think it's necessary to investigate USAID operations in Sri Lanka?
Definitely, because Sri Lanka, we have a ministry which is looking the registration of NGOs and maybe other different fundamental, religious organizations are there. We don't know for what motive they are running. Even today, I heard that in some area in the eastern province, intelligence has got some of these, suspect terrorist or activities can come up. I don't know 100%. It has to be proved by the Ministry of Defense. But I can tell one thing, definitely you must investigate all accounts or you must give a, basically period that is called internationally, we have seen basically amnesty period for the NGOs and disclose honestly for what purpose these funds are. If they are true, then nothing to worry. But if there are some hidden agendas, must take some action. Definitely, you must take some.
Thank you very much. Let's leave it at that. That was Dr. Pratibha Mahieash, former Human Rights Commissioner. Appreciate it. Let's get more on the legal aspect of this matter, and joining me is the lecturer in charge for public international law at the Bandanayake Center for International Studies, attorney at law, Dr. Udara Soisa. Thank you very much, Udara, for your time. I mean, looking at these information that's been uncovered with regard to USAID and its activities, especially in this part of the world, do you think our laws have the necessary checks and balances to safeguard our nation by pseudo-organizations acting as humanitarians? Yet here we are learning, doing the absolute inhumane acts.
Mahieash, it's a very complicated question that you asked. In terms of the legal framework, I think Sri Lankan legal framework is not robust and strong. I mean, I don't think even the US legal system is strong in that aspect when it comes to these kind of investigations. Because if you look at even in US, most of these investigations and in fact actions are taken by executive laws that are made by the President Trump himself. So, I mean, when you look at it in terms of Sri Lankan context, the biggest problem is we are very much often dependent on foreign organizations and foreign organizational aid, right? So the problem is making stricter laws when it comes to these kind of organizations in Sri Lanka without having the necessary economic strength to withstand is highly unlikely. Because as you saw, often embassies, diplomats, play a crucial role in our political system, and which is very unfortunate in my opinion. The fact that we have lost our sovereignty along the way within these last, I would say, like, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years to be exact, to give a timeline, and we are quite dependent on the support which is given to us from the international community. And because of this reason, we are also quite dependent on international organizations that are being funded by the international community. This weakens and undermines our sovereignty to a great extent. And in my view, I believe that there needs to be certain stronger laws to ensure that this kind of nefarious activities wouldn't happen.
Udare, in an instant like this, what do you think this government should do? Perhaps look into it? not only USAID, perhaps all these foreign organizations whose agenda doesn't tally with what they say they're here to do?
Not only the current government, I think for any government, it is better to have a stronger legal system that ensures that any organization operating or any even diplomatic or council officers operating in Sri Lanka ensures that they stick to their parameters, not getting involved in active politics. And this is, in my opinion, this is something that needs to be extremely encouraged, to make certain laws that would ensure the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the country is always at the foremost, not only getting some quick money aid for the programs, etc.
Absolutely, an interesting point of view. All right, let's leave it at that. That was Dr. Udara Sovisa, lecturer in charge for public international law at the Bandanaki Center for International Studies. Thank you very much. But what will the government do? Well, will they investigate or bring in a mechanism that would have the necessary checks and balances? Well, joining me now is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Arun Hemachandra. Appreciate you coming on the show despite with your really busy schedule. Minister, with the information that's coming out from the United States with regard to USAID and their undercover activities, will your government, who has thus far been having a good record on accountability, take the necessary steps to investigate that organization and their activities in Sri Lanka?
First of all, thank you, Mahieash, for inviting me to this beautiful show, and I'm so glad to join once again. Yeah, it's a good question. But certain things are subjective, certain things are objective. In my opinion, certain allegations or certain problems were made on the ethical grounds. So we as a government, we have to make sure certain things will not take place in the future. But then again, there are any legal grounds for us to scrutinize or maybe take some actions in regards to certain activities that took place, and there are issues with some evidence also. So it's on ethical basis. So we as a government, we have to be committed in future in regards to certain projects or certain things that are coming up. We have to be really precise, and we have to be really selective. But then again, that is the stand of the government as of now.
Minister, now keeping those issues aside, USAID was funding lots of humanitarian projects in Sri Lanka too. They were the key funders to a lot of NGOs, local NGOs as well. Now, since the Trump administration has cut funding to this organization, what's going to happen to those projects? Will the government absorb them, or what's the future on them?
Well, there were several projects that were funded to the private sector, and also when it comes to the government sector, as per the records that I have, there were 5 projects that were funded by USAID directly, and there were many projects that were being discussed. And also the USDA was funding one project, and that has not been halted as of now. That is about providing school children with some lunch. So that program is ongoing. But then again, when it comes to USAID, the 5 projects have been halted so far. So we are waiting for the official communication from the US end, and most probably by 20th of April we will get a concrete answer, or sometimes even by 2nd of April we may get an answer, because 2nd of April we are waiting for certain announcements to be made. So based on those official communications, we will check whether we can involve any other stakeholders to these existing ongoing projects, and we will see, and we will take certain decisions as a government. But meantime, we do strongly believe that there are still room for the US administration to make some consideration in this regard. So we are having very close contact and communication with the US mission here. So these things are being discussed from our side also. So let's see. We are also being optimistic, and we are hoping for the best.
Minister, now regulating the international NGO space, especially when operating in Sri Lanka, seems to be a vital aspect that is required. Will this government take the necessary steps to do that?
Well, when it comes to governments do have their policies, and especially working with NGOs do involve a lot of regulations and of course mandate, and there are certain activities purely based on norms. So indeed there were certain issues that were reported in the past, but what we believe, as a government, we will stick to the globally accepted norms and values, as well as certain mandates which are commonly accepted. And also as a government we are really careful with certain activities and certain involvements of certain organizations, but then again we do believe we can overcome all these problems and all these things with proper administration, proper regulations. But also we have to understand one thing, that we should not also look at all the NGOs as kind of in a mindset of some negativity included ones. So they are also here to help us, and they are also here to kind of assist the government in need, and definitely without the support of NGOs the governments alone cannot handle certain activities. But also the NGOs also have to be really careful with certain allegations or certain pinpointing towards them in case if they are any. So it's all about having checks and balances, and it's all about having a proper transparent mechanism. So we as a government, we are highly committed to have a very transparent, very inclusive activities with the NGOs. Also from the NGO side also they also have to be really transparent, and it has to be in a vice versa mechanism.
Well, interesting point of view indeed. Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Arun Hemachandra, so appreciate it. We have to leave it at that. Thank you very much. Well, as you saw, we had a lot of ground in terms of the subjects we discussed to cover tonight, so no time for a closing statement. That'll do from all of us at State of the Nation for this week. Thank you very much for joining us. On a programming note, since an election has been declared, my team is now busy in prepping for the upcoming election and more importantly working to bring you yet another election broadcast that's unrivaled and unmatched to any other here in Sri Lanka. So we won't be on air in the whole month of April as we will give way for election preparation, but we will see you again right here after the election, which is I think on 11th of May. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode. I'll see you soon on Get Real and also on other programs. Make sure that you are back here on 11th of May. See you next time.